He could smell the burning before he could see anything. 19 years old. 150 pounds of boy under 100 pounds of equipment. The aircraft was too low, and it was too fast. Private Donald Burgett of the 101st Airborne went out the door into a burning sky. Tracers came up through the formation in long orange strings. His canopy cracked, and the ground arrived almost immediately. There was no time to swing, no time to steer. The landmark he had memorized in England was somewhere else entirely. He hit a French field in the dark and lay still. 6,600 screaming eagles were coming down around him, most of them in the wrong place. Some landed miles from where they were meant to be. Some came down in flooded ground and never got out of their harnesses. Inside 33 days, the division would count over 4,600 men killed, wounded, or missing. That was the start of it. Now move forward 17 months to a heated room in occupied Germany. 3 officers of the Wehrmacht sit down with maps and a stack of staff notes. Heinrich von Lüttwitz, Fritz Bayerlein, Heinz Kokott. Between them they had commanded a Panzer Corps, a Panzer Division, and a Volksgrenadier Division. They had fought in Poland, in France, in North Africa, and on the Eastern Front. American historians wanted them to explain 1 week in the Battle of the Bulge. Explaining it took 10 separate conferences, because these men spent that December trying to break one American division out of a Belgian town. They failed. This is why. In the summer of 1942, the 101st Airborne Division did not exist. The Army activated it at Camp Claiborne, Louisiana, on the 16th of August. 3 days later, its first commander put one sentence into General Order Number 5. Major General William Lee wrote that the division had no history, but it has a rendezvous with destiny. He was not being poetic. He was being accurate. There was nothing behind these men. No campaign streamers, no regimental dead. The Germans, by contrast, had invented this kind of warfare and had already given it up. Fallschirmjäger took the Belgian fort at Eben-Emael in 1940 with gliders and shaped charges. They took Crete out of the sky in 1941. Crete cost them so heavily that Hitler never authorized another large airborne assault, so the Wehrmacht held a settled professional opinion about paratroopers. It was based on their own hard experience. Lightly armed, no artillery worth the name, no tanks, no trucks, no supply line behind them. Dangerous for about 48 hours, and after that a problem you surround and squeeze. That opinion was correct in almost every technical particular. It also became the most expensive assumption on the Western Front, because the American division dropping into Normandy would be committed 3 times in 6 months, each time into a position that was already coming apart, each time carrying what a man can carry, and very little else. And each time, a German staff officer would work out how many days they could last. One of the American officers you are about to meet had 99 days left to live. He did not know that, and neither did the men who followed him across an open causeway. The night drop into Normandy was, by any planning standard, a failure. Cloud banks broke the formations apart on the run-in from the west. Flak scattered them further. Pilots pushed the green light early, late, high, and low. Men came down in orchards, in villages, in marshland, and in the sea. Burgett found one man from his own company in the first hour. He did not find his platoon for days. Now look at the same night from the other side of the hedgerow. German command posts began receiving parachute reports from everywhere at once. Sainte-Mère-Écluse, Saint-Côme-du-Mont, Baupte, Carentan. Every one of those reports was genuine. Together they described an airborne landing spread across an area the size of an English county. No staff officer alive could plot that and produce a coherent enemy objective from it. Rommel was in Germany that night, at his wife's birthday. The 7th Army spent the small hours trying to decide whether this was the invasion or a diversion. The accident of the scatter did what no plan could have done. Major Friedrich von der Heyte commanded the German 6th Parachute Regiment south of Carentan. He held the Knight's Cross, and he had jumped into Crete. His men averaged around 17.5 years old. He had trained them hard on this exact ground. His decision in the first hours was to push his 1st Battalion north toward the coast. His reasoning was sound on the information in front of him. Reports suggested a limited landing, and a German strongpoint behind Utah Beach was calling for relief. The risk was obvious to him, even as he gave the order. He would be committing a full battalion into ground where he could not locate the enemy. The result came inside a day. The battalion reached Sainte-Marie-du-Mont, found it held, and fought to pieces, withdrawing. Around 300 of his men surrendered. 25 reached Carentan. Von der Heyte had spent a battalion learning the shape of a problem he could not yet name. Carentan sat between Utah Beach and Omaha Beach like a knot in a rope. Take it, and 2 separate American beachheads became one lodgment. Leave it, and they stayed 2 armies waiting to be attacked in the gap between them. There was exactly one usable approach: a raised road across flooded marsh, 4 bridges on it, and no cover of any kind. On the 10th of June, Lieutenant Colonel Robert Cole put the 502nd's 3rd Battalion onto that road. He was 29, from San Antonio, West Point class of 1939. His men moved along the causeway a few at a time, through mortar and machine gun fire all night. By dawn on the 11th, German fire had them pinned in a cabbage field. Ahead of them stood a stone farmhouse with German machine guns firing from the windows. Cole made his decision there, in the field, with no reserve and no armor. His reasoning was brutal, and it was simple. Men lying still in the open were being killed at a steady rate. Artillery had not shifted that farmhouse. The risk was that a charge across 200 yards would destroy his battalion outright. He picked up a rifle with a bayonet fixed to it and blew a whistle. Fewer than half his men heard the whistle or understood what it meant. Cole went anyway, and about a third of the battalion went with him. They crossed the cabbage field and went into the farmhouse and the hedgerows beyond with bayonets. It was the first fixed bayonet charge by American infantry in the European campaign. The Germans holding the position broke. By the afternoon of the 12th, von der Heyte's regiment had fired off almost everything it had. He pulled out in darkness, and Carentan fell the next morning. They recommended Cole for the Medal of Honor for what he did in that field. He never received it. Carentan was taken on the 12th. On the 13th, the Germans came back for it. The counterattack came from the 17th SS Panzer Grenadier Division, with von der Heyte's paratroopers alongside them. Assault guns, armored infantry, against men who had been fighting continuously for a week with no resupply worth the word. The 506th line west of the town was thin, and it bent almost immediately. Riflemen were down to a few clips each. Combat Command A of the 2nd Armored Division was sitting inside Carentan in reserve. It came out mid-afternoon with Shermans and self-propelled guns. The attack broke apart. The paratroopers held the ground they were already standing on. Afterwards, the Americans called that fight Bloody Gulch. Here is where this story stops being about a battle. The German commanders around Carentan were not confused about whether Americans would fight. They had watched Americans fight for a week, and they had drawn the correct conclusions. What would not work was the arithmetic. A light division without artillery, armor, or supply should be finished inside 2 days. This one had been in contact for 7 and was still attacking. Nobody in the German chain of command had a category for that. So the question changes here, and it stays changed for the rest of this story. Not whether the 101st Airborne could win a fight. The question is what happens to men who get used this way deliberately, sent to the place where the line has already broken, sent with what they can carry, and sent again in September, then again in December, into worse. Somebody was always going to pay for that arithmetic. They came back to England in July, and they were in the air again in September. Operation Market Garden went in on the 17th, in daylight, in clear weather. The 101st drew the southern end of the corridor. Their job was every bridge between Eindhoven and Veghel on one road for British armor to drive up. 60 miles of single highway with no flanks at all. The drops were accurate this time, and the first hours were almost easy. Dutch civilians came into the streets with orange flags and handed out anything they still had. Then the Germans blew the bridge at sun as the 506th came up to it. That single charge cost the operation most of a day, while engineers brought up a Bailey Bridge. A few miles west, at best, Cole's battalion fought for a second crossing on the same canal. On the 18th of September, Cole called for air support. The pilot asked for orange recognition panels on the ground. He decided to place them himself. Looking up to find the aircraft, he was shot through the head by a sniper in a farmhouse. 99 days after the cabbage field at Carentan. 2 weeks later, the War Department approved his Medal of Honor for that causeway. His mother accepted it at Fort Sam Houston. She stood on the parade ground where he had played as a child. His widow and his 2-year-old son watched. The next day, on the same ground, Private First Class Joe Mann was hit a 4th time. Both his arms were bandaged to his sides when a German grenade landed in his position. He fell backwards onto it. 2 medals of honor, inside a mile, inside 24 hours. The men started calling the road Hell's Highway, and the name stuck to it permanently. The Germans cut it repeatedly, at Veghel, at Eerde, at Covering. Every time it was cut, the corridor north died. The paratroopers had to open it again on foot. Birgit spent 72 days on that road. The division had been told to expect a few. By the time they came off the line, the 101st had lost around 2,100 men. Arnhem had failed, and the corridor had gone nowhere at all. And inside 9 weeks they would be loaded onto trucks and sent somewhere worse. On December 16th, 1944, 3 German armies came out of the Ardennes fog. Around 200,000 men in the first wave, into a sector chosen precisely because it was quiet. The 101st was 90 miles away at Mourmelon, in France, refitting. They had come off the Holland line 4 weeks earlier. Replacements had arrived, and nobody had trained them up yet. Weapons were away at the ordnance shops. Eisenhower released his last 2 reserve divisions on the 17th. The reasoning was that the German attack was aimed at a road network, and road networks have hubs. 7 roads met at a Belgian market town called Bastogne. The risk was plain to everyone in that room. He was sending a light division with no tanks against panzer divisions in winter, at 4 hours' notice. The result would be decided by hours, and it was. They loaded into open cattle trucks after dark and drove through the night with headlights burning. Headlights on, in a war zone, because there was no time left to do it properly. Men stood in the trucks because there was no room to sit down. It was freezing, and most of them had no overcoats and no overshoes. Some had no helmets. Some had no rifle, and were told they would find one on the road. Coming the other way in the dark was the American Army that had already been broken. Men from the 28th Infantry Division and the 9th Armored, walking west, some of them without weapons. The paratroopers going east took ammunition off them as they passed. Birgit was in one of those trucks. Able Company, 1st Battalion of the 506th, 1 battalion over from the Easy Company of Band of Brothers. He had fought in 2 countries, and he was still 19 years old. The division reached Bastogne on the 19th of December. Lead elements of the German 2nd Panzer Division were a few hours behind them on the same roads. The first thing the Germans took was the hospital. On the night of the 19th, a German column overran the 326th Airborne Medical Company. They took the surgeons, the operating tents, the instruments, and most of the division's medical supplies. Everything that happened afterwards inside Bastogne happened without a proper surgical team. north of the town, at Neuville, Team Désabry and a battalion of the 506th held a village. Lieutenant Colonel James Laprade was killed there on the 20th. Major William Désabry was badly wounded and taken prisoner when his aid post was overrun. Between them, they cost the 2nd Panzer Division a day it could not spare. Then the ring closed. By the 21st, there was no road out of the town. Inside were roughly 11,000 men of the 101st, and about the same number, again, of everybody else. Combat Command. B of the 10th Armored Division, the 705th Tank Destroyer Battalion, the 969th and 755th Field Artillery Battalions, and survivors of the 333rd. Both the 969th and the 333rd were African American units, and their guns held that perimeter together. Outside were elements of the 47th Panzer Corps under Heinrich von Lüttwitz, the 2nd Panzer Division, Panzer Lehr, and the 26th Volksgrenadier Division under General Major Heinz Kokott, who had been handed the town as his problem. Kokott's decision in the 20th was to encircle rather than assault frontally. His reasoning was arithmetic again, and again it was good arithmetic. He did not have the infantry to attack every side of that perimeter at once. His risk was that a siege hands the defender time. Time was the one thing this offensive did not have. The result was 10 days that finished the German war in the West. Inside the ring, the numbers got worse by the hour. Battery commanders rationed their guns to 10 rounds a day. Wounded men were laid out in a chapel and in cellars and treated by anybody with hands. Fog sat on the town, and nothing could fly. No resupply, no air support, not one wounded man evacuated. On the 21st of December, an army doctor named Jack Pryor put out a call for civilian nurses. 2 women walked into his aid station on the Rue de Neufchâteau the next morning. One of them had 3 days left to live. At about 11:30 on the morning of the 22nd, 4 Germans came up the Arlon Road. 2 officers and 2 enlisted men. They were waving a white flag and a bedspread taken from a farmhouse along the way. Major Wagner of the 47th Panzer Corps was the senior man. The junior officer was Lieutenant Helmuth Henke of Panzer Lehr, carrying a briefcase under his arm. They walked past an American bazooka team without being fired on. Then they stopped in front of a foxhole belonging to Private First Class Leo Palma. Palma was a Browning automatic rifleman in F Company of the 327th Glider Infantry. He was in a hole in the snow in front of the Kessler farm. 4 German soldiers had walked up to him under a white flag in the middle of a siege. He had no idea at all what he was supposed to do about it. The Americans blindfolded them and walked them back through the lines. Inside the briefcase was a typed document addressed to the American commander of the encircled town. It said the fortunes of war were changing. American forces in and near Bastogne had been surrounded by strong German armored units. It offered one possibility of saving them from what it called total annihilation: the honorable surrender of the town inside 2 hours. It promised that if he refused, German artillery would destroy the town and everyone in it. Von Lüttwitz had signed it. Kokott's regiments were in position to make good on it. And there was one more thing in that document, and the Germans had put it there deliberately. It appealed to what it called well-known American humanity, and it named the Belgian civilians in Bastogne. There were around 3,000 of them in the cellars, under the shell fire, with nowhere left to go. The message reached Brigadier General Anthony McAuliffe at division headquarters that afternoon. He was 46, and he was not supposed to be commanding a division at all. Maxwell Taylor was in Washington at a staff conference. McAuliffe was the artillery commander standing in for him. He read the opening lines and assumed the Germans were offering to surrender to him. When his staff corrected him, he said one word out loud and dropped the paper on the floor. Then he sat down to compose an official reply and found he had nothing to write. He told the room he did not know what to tell them. Lieutenant Colonel Harry Kinnard said the thing he had already said would be hard to improve on. McAuliffe asked what he meant. Kinnard reminded him. The typed answer that went back read, "To the German commander, nuts, the American commander." Colonel Bud Harper carried it down to the two blindfolded German officers waiting at the perimeter. Henke asked whether the reply was negative or affirmative. Harper told him it was decidedly not affirmative, and then translated it into plainer English for him. He added that if the Germans kept attacking, the Americans would kill everyone who came in. The two officers saluted stiffly and started back up the Arlon Road. Henke said they would kill many Americans, and that this was war. Harper wished them good luck, and said afterwards that he never understood why he had. Understand what that exchange actually was. McAuliffe had no artillery ammunition to speak of. He had no air cover, no supply route, and no surgeons. What he had was a town, a perimeter, and 22,000 men in the open. The German officers had walked in with a mathematical case, and it was a strong one. A man who did not swear had answered it with the flattest word in the American language. It went round the perimeter before the day was out. Kokott's divisions came on the next morning. On the 23rd of December, the fog lifted. Pathfinders from the 506th jumped into the perimeter that morning and set up their beacons. Then the transports came over, and the sky filled with parachutes, colored canopies, hundreds of them, ammunition and rations and morphine and blood plasma. Kokott was outside the perimeter watching the same sky. He and his officers watched the canopies come down. They believed the Americans were being reinforced from the air. They were not. It was ammunition. But the mistake ran straight through his attacking units. Kokott wrote afterwards that the effect was to increase the disorder in the ranks of the attackers. Clear weather worked both ways. On the evening of the 24th, German bombers came over Bastogne. At about 8:30, a 500-pound bomb went into the aid station on the Rue de Neufchâteau. The building came down on 30 wounded American soldiers in the basement and killed every one of them. Renée Lemaire was 30 years old, and she was from Bastogne. She was a nurse working in Brussels who had come home for Christmas to see her parents. Her fiancé had been arrested by the Gestapo earlier that year because he was Jewish. She had volunteered at Pryor's aid station on the 21st and had not stopped since. When the bomb hit, she went back into the burning building 6 times and brought out 6 men. She was killed going in for a 7th. Augusta Chaiwi was in the house next door with Dr. Pryor when it happened. She was 23, born in the Belgian Congo to a Congolese mother and a Belgian father from Bastogne. The blast threw her through a wall. She got up and went on working until the siege ended. Pryor found what was left of Renée Lemaire in the ruins that night. He wrapped her in a white parachute and carried her to her parents' house. It is 3:15 on Christmas morning, and the attack comes in from the west. Kokott has stopped attacking everywhere and is hitting one place with everything he has left. 18 tanks, a battalion of infantry riding on them in white snowsuits. They come out of the dark at Champs and strike the glider infantry line near Hemroul. The line breaks. German armor is inside the perimeter and driving straight for a battalion command post. Then the panzers split into 2 columns, and that is the mistake. One column swings toward Champs from behind. The other runs east for Bastogne itself. The glider infantry do not pull back. They hold their original holes and let the tanks roll past. Then they take the German infantry off the road. 92 prisoners come out of that field. 4 tank destroyers of the 705th are already waiting on the Champs Road. 2 companies of the 502nd close on the column from the flank. Bazooka men work at 300 yards, because that is as far as the weapon will reach. 10 German tanks die in the fields around Hemroul. The last one is captured intact. By the middle of Christmas morning, there is nothing left of the attack at all. Kokott does not know it yet. News of the failure takes hours to reach him. By then, his infantry are finished as an attacking force. Vincent Speranza was a machine gunner on that perimeter. He said afterwards that the snow turned red. That night, McAuliffe put out a Christmas message telling his men what they had stopped. He listed the German formations identified around the town: 4 panzer divisions, 2 infantry divisions, 1 parachute division. Then he asked his men what exactly was merry about any of it. Relief came from the south on the 26th of December. Patton's Third Army had turned 90 degrees in winter and driven north into the flank of the salient. Lieutenant Colonel Crichton Abrams took the 37th Tank Battalion up the Assinois Road in the late afternoon. The lead tank was a Sherman named Cobra King. At around 4:45, it reached a pillbox 2 miles from the east center of the town. Waiting at that pillbox were engineers from a company of the 326th Airborne Engineer Battalion. 25 minutes later, Abrams shook hands with McAuliffe. The corridor was 1 road wide, and it was under fire, but it was open. Opening it cost the 4th Armored Division about 1,000 men killed and wounded. Now the cost inside the town. Between the 19th of December and the 6th of January, the 101st lost 341 killed, 1,691 wounded, 516 missing. Combat Command B of the 10th Armored took around 500 casualties holding the eastern approaches. The Belgians of Bastogne buried their own separately, in a town that was mostly rubble by then. René Lehr is buried there. For those 10 days, the entire 101st Airborne Division received the Distinguished Unit Citation. No whole division in the history of the United States Army had been decorated that way before. The men themselves were not especially interested in the citation. What they objected to was the word rescued, and they went on objecting to it for 50 years. Their position was that they had never asked anybody to come and get them. McAuliffe handed the division back to Maxwell Taylor when Taylor came in with the relief column. And the fighting around Bastogne ran on into January, which is the part that never makes the films. Now go back to the 3 German generals and the maps. In November and December of 1945, the American Army sat them down to reconstruct what had happened. Von Lüttwitz, who had commanded the Corps, Bayerlein, who had commanded Panzer Lehr, Kokott, who had been handed Bastogne. They worked through it across 10 separate conferences, with the maps and whatever staff notes still existed. What comes out of those sessions is not fear, and it is not admiration either. It is a professional accounting of something that would not behave the way it was supposed to. The Corps had a timetable, and that timetable needed the Bastogne road hub early. Instead, the hub held, and the Corps had to leave a whole division behind to deal with it. That division was Kokott's, and it was ground to pieces doing the job. The armor that went west without him ran out of fuel short of the Moose. The American 2nd Armored Division destroyed it near Celle. 2 miles from the river, it was sent to cross. The offensive died in the first week of January. Germany put close to 500,000 men into the Ardennes. It lost well above 100,000 of them. Those losses could not be replaced, and 4 months later the war in Europe was over. So here is the honest answer to the question this film opened with. The Wehrmacht was not haunted by a legend, or by a shoulder patch with an eagle on it. What beat them was a formation that kept refusing to arrive where their calculations ended. They knew exactly what a light airborne division was worth, measured in days. They ran that number at Carentan, then on Hell's Highway, then at Bastogne. Every time, the number came out wrong, and the men who had run it were still working out why a year later. In a heated room, in occupied Germany, with the maps. Donald Birgit went on from Bastogne into Alsace, then into Germany, then to Berchtesgaden. He was wounded 3 times. He was 19 when he jumped into Normandy, and 20 when the war in Europe ended. Almost none of the men who trained with him in Able Company came home. Afterwards, he got a job, married a woman named Twyla, and raised 5 children in Michigan. And for the rest of his life, he wrote it down. 4 books of it, so that it would exist somewhere. Donald Burgett died on the 23rd of March, 2017. He was 91 years old. If you want these men kept by name instead of by number, subscribe, like it, and send it to somebody whose grandfather wore the patch. They will know the name of the division. They may not know the name of the nurse, because there is one more image, and it belongs to Bastogne. On Christmas Eve of 1944, an American doctor came out of a burning cellar carrying a Belgian woman. She had gone back into that building 6 times for men she had never met. He had no coffin, no flag, and nothing else in that town to wrap her in. So he used what had fallen out of the sky 3 days earlier and saved all of them. White silk, the same silk that opened over Normandy and over Holland and over a Belgian field. It had carried ammunition to men who had none. And on the 24th of December, it carried Renée Lemaire home to her parents, 8 streets away,